Hey, it's Don with the DIY Collaborative, and today we're going to show you a simple way to propagate ornamental sweet potato vine. And what I'm showing you here are just a few examples of how we use it around our landscape to just add some additional color. Sit back, enjoy, and let us know if you do this or maybe if you've learned something.
So what we're going to show you today is an easy way to take some cuttings from sweet potato vines that you may already have. But I'm going to take those cuttings and put them in water in just some water bottles that I have. And I've got a couple here that I'm going to show you how I prepare these. I just take the lids off. I take the wrappers off or the labels off. Don't need these. And you really don't even have to do this part, but I do. And then I take a razor blade knife. You could do this with a pocket knife or anything else. And just be careful when you're doing this. I just make a tiny little cut kind of right here in this first seam just to get a cut started. And then I'll take a pair of scissors. You could do this with garden shears or you could even do it with a knife. And then I just cut the bottles all the way around like this. And again, be careful when you're doing this. But I take this piece then that I've cut off because it's kind of like a little funnel, if you will. And that's what helps support the cutting that I'm going to show you here in a little bit. It helps keep that cutting up out of the water. But then I just place these back in the bottle like that and then fill it up with water to the bottom of that lid where that lid was in there. And then I'll put my cuttings down in there. But we'll show you here in a few minutes how to do this. And I'm just going to do one more to show you. I just make a little incision there or a little cut with the razor blade knife, and then I come back and just cut the top off. And you can do this with any kind of a bottle or whatever, and it doesn't even have to be a bottle. I've seen people use like a solo cup to start these cuttings in, and I've even done that. But I just found that this is handy because you kind of got this little piece here, like I said, that's kind of like a funnel, and it helps hold your cutting up out of the water because you don't want it completely down in there. But it's really worked for me. And then, after I'm done with my cuttings, I'll just like dump the water out of these on my compost bin or something, and then I'll put these in the recycle bin, and they'll go off to recycle land and become flip-flops or whatever. Just an easy, simple tip. Okay, this was one area where we had a lot of shade here due to there's a big, actually two big oak trees right here adjacent to this bed, so it's shady a lot of the time. So last fall, when everything kind of went south as far as the plants are concerned, we emptied out a lot of our pots and dug out the old sweet potato vines. This is ornamental sweet potato here that I'm showing you, these vines. And these are a lime green. I've got some other ones that I'll show you in a minute that are in a hanging basket that we did that are in the backyard. And we just love this because it adds, like a pop of color in an otherwise, kind of dark and shady corner of our front yard. But what I really want to show you, and we planted these from the actual potato, if you will, this spring. We overwintered them in the house, just in like a shoebox or a cardboard box, in a plant room that we have in our house, in a grow room that we use. And you've probably seen that if you've seen any of our other videos. But we just, cleaned up the potatoes in the fall when we emptied out the pots that they were in, snipped off any vines that were left, and just kind of stored them in a dry, cool, dark place, if you will, over winter. And then I think I've got a picture of a tray of them that I'll put up in the video here. But this spring, when we were putting in these giant or mammoth elephant ear bulbs, we decided just to pop these 4 sweet potato vine, ornamental sweet potato vine potatoes in the ground just to see what they would do as an experiment. So they've done really well. But what we're going to do today is we're going to show you how to propagate some of this. And you can see, the different vines here. But I just wanted to show you these and how neat they look and how they just added some extra color to an area like this. Okay, so we're back at our one location where we planted the actual ornamental sweet potato potatoes in the spring. And we talked about how I like to take cuttings, and you can see how this is kind of just vining and growing out here. So what I'm going to do is just come back at some point here above one of the leaf nodes and just take a cutting just like that. And when you're doing these, you don't want to let them set out for too long for this method. I mean, we could, what we're going to do anyway, we're going to go ahead and strip off some of these bottom leaves. You don't need those. And I've found in the past that it works better to do this rooting or cuttings, propagating, from an actual vine or the actual stem. I've tried these leaves before. It works, but it's a lot more difficult to get these to root, if you will. So we're going to leave, in this case, we're going to go ahead and leave one or two of the leaves on the stem. And again, you don't want to leave these sitting out too long when you're doing this and let this dry out. So I showed you earlier how I prepared some water bottles for my rooting process in the water that I'm going to use. And what I'm going to do now is take this one cutting and I'm going to cut it right above that second leaf node there. We'll put that guy to the side because that's probably 2 or 3 more plants that we're going to do. And in my bottle, I've already got some water in each one of these. I'm going to take this cutting and just set it in there. And because of the way I made these from cutting the top off the bottle and turning it over, that holds that cutting that I just did up off of the bottom. And that stem in there is what's going to get the little roots on it. Now, it's going to take about a week or so. Don't be discouraged if you don't see anything happening. And I'm going to set these in a place that's outside to where it can get a lot of air. But I'm going to make sure that it's in the shade because you don't want to cook these. They're kind of going to be tender at first. And you need to make sure that the bottle stays full of water. And every few days, maybe 3 or 4 days, check it. If that water's turning green, go ahead and just change it out. You don't have to, rinse out the bottles or start with new bottles or anything. But if it's getting green and kind of nasty and ugly looking, just change the water out. Just pour the water out in your yard or on your garden and then just refill the bottle. But you always want to make sure that it's full, just kind of up to the bottom of where the neck has been turned over, like I showed you earlier when we made these, down in the water. Just make sure that the bottom part of that stem is down in the water. And I think you can see that. So now we're going to take this cutting that we did and we're going to make maybe 2 more plants out of it. So down here on this bottom end that we cut this off of, I'm going to cut off and you can tear these off or you can cut them off. I'm going to cut off a couple of more of the leaves and I'm going to stop right there above where this one is. And I'm going to go in there and make a cut right there. And I'm going to take this one and it's kind of curved there and we could use that, but I'm just going to cut it off kind of like that. And I'm going to let that be another start. And then I'm going to take this one and you don't need all these extra leaves on here. So I'm going to cut a few of the leaves off of that one and right here, because this is the end of that first stem that I showed you, and that might have been too much because we don't want it to fall down in the water. I might have should have left this one, but we'll see. Or what you could do is just drop it in one of these others that's got leaves in it, and you see how it's kind of holding it up? That's perfect. So now let's get a couple of more samples of cuttings. You can see here on this plant how we've got, see how the ends or the tender shoots are sticking up here. We've got at least 2 here that we can use, and then we've got one back in here that we can use, and there's even another one over here that's trying to grow into that sweet potato vine. Now, you could leave this, elephant ear, the mammoth elephant ears. You could leave these and just kind of train them where you want them to go, but because we're trying to get some cuttings, I'm going to come right here and cut that one off, and then I'm going to take this over and make more propagation plants out of it. I'm going to do the same thing with this one. I'm not cutting it all the way back. I'm just going to get some of it. Same way with this one. I'm not cutting it all the way back because this is just one plant, one stalk, one stem, if you will, from one potato that's down in there. but I like this little end here, so I'm going to get a piece of it to make another plant with right there. We're just going to cut off a few of the leaves like that. And on this time, we're going to clean that one up just a little bit. It doesn't really matter. We're just going to kind of leave that one like that because you want something to help hold the stem up out of the water. You don't want it to go completely down into the bottom of the water. But that'll be a nice plant. We've got this one. We can probably make, you could probably make 5 or 6 out of this one if you really wanted to. But I'm just trying to get a few more of these going that we can use around in our landscape. So I'm just trimming off some of the nodes there. And let's see, I'm going to take this one right above where that one is. And this is actually a little bit long because if I put that in there, you can see how it's down, it's touching the bottom there. And you don't really want that. You want it to just kind of be suspended in there. So I'm going to cut that off and just have it to where that one's just kind of hanging down in the water. Same way with this next one. It's touching the bottom down in the bottle of water. So I'm going to pull it back out and just cut some of it off and just kind of set it in the top there. This one, just going to cut a little bit of it back off and then just set it in there like that. So a simple, easy process. Give this about a week or 2 weeks, and these are going to have a lot of roots on it. We'll show you that after the progress. I'll show you how that looks. And you can take these then and you can pot them up, or you could go put these straight out into the landscape if you wanted to. Now what I'm going to try to do with these is, I showed you earlier that purple sweet potato vine hanging basket that we have back on our patio. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do with these, if the boss who's filming today doesn't want them somewhere else in our landscape, I'm going to try to maybe make a hanging basket, and I'll show you a shot of the one I did last year out of this lime green sweet potato vine, kind of like the purple one that I showed you earlier. I'm going to try to make a hanging basket out of these. Okay, this is the purple one we were showing you earlier, and you can see how some of these are just kind of long and spindly and hanging down. And I'm just trying to look for a good, maybe this one, maybe a good specimen. I'm leaving that other one alone because it's got a bloom on it, and I don't know. I just happen to like the blooms. So I'm just going to get up in here where that one's at and snip it like that. And then I'm going to go take and cut this down and use this stem or this vine or this stalk to make about, I don't know, in this case maybe just 2, because of, it's got all the leaves up on this end, or maybe we'll just make 1 out of this one. It's kind of not the same. Maybe I will pick on this one if that's okay with you. Yeah. So we got this one. We're going to use it even though it's got a couple of blooms. And what we'll probably go ahead and do for the rooting part of it is cut those blooms off, because we don't want the plant sending a lot of energy and effort into flowering. We want it to concentrate on making new roots here. So now I'm just cleaning this one up a little bit, getting some of the lower leaf stalks off. And I'm going to trim that one right there. And I'm going to take these blooms off, even though they're beautiful. And I'm just going to leave that one kind of like it is, and I'm going to put it down in one of my bottles of water. And then we've got this one. And I'm going to go ahead and trim it back to about right there. And then I'm going to take off that couple of bottom limbs. And maybe this big one here. And this one. Then I'm just going to put that down in my bottle of water. And that's it. Okay, so here we're back at our little potting greenhouse area. And we've got a shelf here that we use like early in the spring when we're bringing out flats of plants to harden them off and getting them ready to go into the landscape. But what I've done is we've got a potting tray that we use to work on, but I've turned it upside down on the top shelf because I want to make sure that these are in the shade. And I'm just going to put this up on that shelf back in the shade so it can get, a lot of good air and a little bit of light, but not direct sunlight. And I'm going to probably, we come out every morning anyway and water and check the other plants in the area. I'm just going to monitor the water levels in these and then see how they do. Don't think that you can, set these up like this and forget about it and come back in a week. You kind of need to monitor, especially if it's hot outside and, breezy, because all of your water can evaporate or will evaporate out of these bottles. You need to make sure that they stay hydrated, if you will. So, okay, it's been nearly a week. It'll be a week tomorrow since we showed you how we do our cuttings. And I wanted to give you an update on progress on the rooting of the sweet potato vines that we started last Sunday in the water. So this is them here, and I'm going to take them over to the bench here just to make it a little easier to show. And so like I was saying, if you keep these cuttings down in the water, you can see all of those roots. I don't know if you can see that. Does that show up pretty good? So what I'm probably going to do tomorrow is go ahead and take all of these and I'll pot them up either in some smaller pots or directly in the ground, or maybe I'm going to make another hanging basket like I showed you that we have on our patio. But for now, I'm just going to put that back in here. But it's just amazing how easy and how quick these things will root in the water. And you can look at this one, look at the amazing amount of roots that it has. And I didn't do anything other than just put straight water in here. There's no plant food or anything like that. But every one of these that we did cuttings on, look at the roots on that one. It's just amazing how many roots that it has. And in just a matter of weeks after we plant these either in pots or in the ground, these things will take off and they'll be really long vines. And then here's some of the other darker sweet potato vine that we took cuttings of. And if I can get it out of there, you can see how many roots it has. And it's just like taking off. So it's just an easy, simple way to get more of these sweet potato vines to put around in your landscape if you want to.